Moving on to discussion items. Ms. Nash and Ms. Thomas, Ames Web results.
Very timely, huh? So you should have a copy of the PowerPoint and also have a copy of some Ames web data, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, I know Carrie has some extras if people want to look at paper copies. We just went through, for those of you that aren't familiar, we just finished our winter screening with using the tool Ames Web, which is when you hear them talking about progress monitoring, that's the tool we use to progress monitor students as well. But for K-5, for both buildings, every fall, every winter, and every spring, we actually screen every student. So whether the student is at grade level, beyond grade level, below grade level, we screen every student to find out. It's a good way for us to measure our system and see how well we're doing with kids in general. It's also a way to figure out which kids perhaps need to be identified for receiving either some enrichment or some additional support. So I just wanted to give you a general idea of what Ames Web is all about, so that you'll understand what the assessments are that we're using when we screen. So the first one that you're looking at is letter sound fluency. And as you heard, most of these assessments, when they're done with screening, are 1 minute in length. Granted, it takes time to get the student there, it's time for the student to move on, but most of them are done with their iPads. So as the person that's doing the assessing, I would have an iPad in front of me, and as the student is reading through, for example, letter sounds, I just tap the screen if they made an error, and then tap the screen where they end, and that information automatically gets loaded into Ames Web. So all of the data that you're going to see in a little bit, and I'm going to have you talk about, is automatically loaded into Ames Web for us to look at, and for you to look at as well.
So, I'm going to interrupt you just because you made reference to it.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the assessment tools, for example, is this screen.
Yep.
And I'm asking you, as a student, to rattle off those
And I would have a paper copy
sounds.
in front
And
of
I'm
you.
going ding, 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 ding,
Yep.
ding, or dong.
Yep.
Okay.
Not dong for me, I'm just saying ding. Well, maybe dong. Anyways,
The last one.
that is a,
That's it.
quote, minute assessment, and I'm done, moving on.
Yep. And then you're ready to move on. Remember, this is a screening tool, so screening's a little different than progress monitoring. In screening, you might have more than one assessment because we're assessing in math and we're assessing in reading.
Right.
Tonight, we're just looking at
I'm just
reading.
referencing when they say
Yep.
we're doing an assessment.
Yep.
I could walk through a lot of assessments in a fairly short time period.
It's quite quick. That's the whole idea behind using Ames Web versus using another tool that could be taking a half hour to 45 minutes. This is a really quick, I always see it's kind of a dipstick in figuring out where kids are at, so we can figure out quickly how to provide them support if they need support, or how we can provide them enrichment.
Okay.
But the letter sound is for earlier grades. It would be for kindergarten, first grade students. Before students can read, we need to first identify, do they know their letter sounds? And so this is just a quick screening tool to identify whether or not students have their letter sounds. And most often it's used early in the year. For kindergarten, it's also used in first grade very early in the year. The next assessment you're looking at is called oral reading fluency. The initials are RCBM, reading curriculum-based measure. And in this particular one, it is again a 1 minute timing, and the student is asked to read at their grade level for 1 minute, and the person that's doing the recording, again, if they make a mistake on a word, they click on the word, and at the end of that 1 minute, they click on where they ended up, and the Ames Web calculates exactly where they left off. It deposits it into the repository, and then it produces some of the charts and graphs that you're going to look at tonight. Now, with RCBM, which is the oral reading fluency measure that's given from grade 2 and up, unlike progress monitoring, where you just use one, with universal screening, you do two. Or three, excuse me. And the reason that you do three is because sometimes students come and they're a little nervous, they're uncomfortable, they might make some silly errors. So we do three, and we take median correct and median errors. So that, for that student that's really nervous, maybe skips an entire line, they're not being assessed based on a silly mistake that they made just because they're uncomfortable or nervous. And so that basically is what our CBM is all about. And then in 4th and 5th grade and 3rd grade as well, we add one additional measure. We add a comprehension measure, and it's called the MAZE, M-A-Z-E. Basically what it is it's called a supported close, in that the first sentence of what the student looks at, now this is done with a whole group of students all at one time. So we don't have to do it one-on-one. You just go into a classroom, and I think the classroom teachers are doing these now. So the classroom teacher will hand this out to all the students in the class. These passages are at grade level. The first sentence is always left intact, and every sentence after that, about every 6th or 7th word, there is an option of 3 different words in parentheses, and the student has the option to choose what is the best word that makes the best sense. And this is not a 1-minute timing, this is a 3-minute timing, but no, the math and the maze are all given in the classroom by the classroom teachers. So we don't have some other interventionist or someone else coming through and doing those. Okay. The tier transition report, which is what you've seen, and we're going to take a look at these, I'm going to give you a couple minutes to talk about them, is what we've done is you can look at the fall, and when you look at the fall, you look at the, remember I talked, not all the board members, but a lot of the board members that were here when I came last year, we talked a little bit about RTI. We talked about the fact that the goal for any district is to have about 75% of your students at any grade level proficient or operating where they need to operate. And those students would appear in Ames Web as green. So when you look in the fall at these students in the green, you'll notice that 44% of the students at that grade level were performing at grade level. Then we come back in the winter, remember, and we benchmark or we screen all the students again, because we want to look at our system, not just students struggling, but we want to see, are we growing kids? And so when you come back the second time in the winter, you'll notice that we had students going from 44% proficient to 74% proficient. In an ideal RTI triangle, that's where you want to be. You want about 74 to 75% of your kids that are proficient, and then the other 20-some% of kids we provide an intervention for. Unfortunately, you probably already know this, we didn't have that luxury. That's why we have so many interventionists providing so many interventions, because the need was so great. You know, and we'll talk a little bit about those numbers and what they look like. But when you look at this report, this is what you want to see. How many kids were in the green at level? How many kids were in the yellow, which are the kids that are sort of hovering around, not where they're at, but they're kind of stuck in that middle area. They need an intervention. And then the kids in red are the kids that are really struggling, and those kids typically need a pretty huge, pretty long, ongoing intervention, and a lot of times those interventions are offered on one-to-one. At this time, in this district, we are only worried about, we are really working hard at providing Tier 2 interventions. But what you don't see up here are the kids that are getting the enrichment. They wouldn't show up in the yellow, they would show up in the green, and it isn't until we sit down with the literacy coaches and we look at this data and put it up on the wall that we say, wow, these are some kids by grade level that are really doing a great job. We need to offer them a little enrichment, a little something extra to really help challenge them. It isn't a GT program. We have those programs operating in the schools, but we are looking at it as enrichment just to provide those kids some support.
Cheryl,
We're making progress. I'm sorry, Mike.
what does the evidence tell us now? Say we take a group of first graders, and let's just say we're just looking at that, okay? So when we come here, after next fall, what type I'm assuming we will probably see some erosion.
Good point.
How, is it a lot? Is it not so bad?
That's a really good point, Mike, in that, we were really concerned because we had a big block of time between the time kids left on winter break and the time we reassessed them in January. And there was already concern about kids backsliding. I have to be frank with you, I was really surprised at how little backsliding I saw. But we had this discussion earlier today. Your point is well taken. During the summer months when kids have that huge break and they come back when school starts in the fall, you do see some backsliding. The hope, and this is the whole idea behind good RTI, the hope is the interventions that these interventionists and and these coaches are providing is so well done and so focused on exactly what those kids need that the hope in the research says when they come back, they won't come back with that big gap that they walked out the door with. That's the beauty of really implementing response to intervention well versus just throwing some things and hoping they work. So
Right.
that's a good point.
And is this, again, and I know once they, for the most part, they walk out the door, they're gone till we see them again. Is there things that we've learned that we could at least make our best effort to send things home for exercises that they could work on over the summer to keep them engaged?
Absolutely.
You guys are smiling. What did I miss here?
No, it's just, it's really an important point, and I wish we could hang on to kids longer, but I think that what we'll do is we'll do the best we can to try to provide some ideas for parents so that they can work through with the summer. Unfortunately, the neediest kids that we have are the ones that we probably don't reach as well. And so we'll do the best we can, but that backslide in the summer has been talked about forever in education.
Well, and I've also inquired on part of the SIG leadership is the community liaisons
I was
that
just going
we've
to ask
hired.
that question, yeah.
Is there money available for them
Yes.
to do anything
Question.
during the summer months
Yeah.
with the children they've been working with the families, to continue those relationships and to offer some of that? And their contract does end June 30th. And so I don't know where discussions are, and this may not be the right time to have those discussions, but that's what my smile was about, was, is there funding available, and what can we do? Because those community liaisons have been working all year long with those families and with children. Is there any hope for that? So.
And that's a really good idea. I mean, we're going to be reevaluating the SIG grant and looking at what we can do to tweak the SIG grant. And that, right, that might be a place that would have good use of the money. I know it was shared with us by the Department of Ed that even though we did qualify for a $500,000 SIG grant, I know that because we're looking at some bigger changes, not bigger changes, but ideas like that there would be the potential to request more funding if we make a good case for it. I mean, that's the bottom line, is just pouring money on a problem doesn't solve any problems. You just have to pour it in very strategically. And we have had, I cannot tell you the outstanding results we've had from those liaisons. It's just amazing. One of the liaisons' goals, and I'm sorry, I'm bird walking, I'll quickly go through this, but one of the liaisons' goals was he contacted every single parent by phone to make sure that they would be at conferences. And his goal for himself was to have 100% parents show up at conferences. And I know the other liaisons have those very same kinds of goals, and those are really important things, but they're helping us to see the value in what conferences should maybe look like even. So I just have to just throw a plug in for them, and that potentially their contract ends the end of July because our SIG money ends the end of July, or June, I'm sorry. But then we're hoping that we find out earlier about when we can refund these things, but we want to make sure we hang on to these people. And I shared this today. There is such an incredible base of people in this district right now. I mean, you have some amazing coaches. Your literacy coaches are just so well-trained, and they're doing such an incredible job. The math coach is doing an amazing job. The liaisons, I think, are just crazy incredible. So there's a lot of really wonderful things
Do we have
happening.
8 total liaisons?
Well, just in the elementary, there's 4, but I know they have them in the other buildings as well.
I'm
because-
just talking about Kennedy and Roosevelt. So
Oh, okay.
there's, okay, 2 each.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
But I know the other buildings have seen the importance of the very same thing, and they really are dedicated. And we just, as a community, we have to be dedicated to making sure we outreach. So,
I think what I'm hearing you say, Mike, is that for that yellow and green group, that section that we feel will be easiest to slide back, what can we do, or what are some options to at least address that small, hopefully it's small, group of kids and their families, whether it's liaison or whatever it may be,
Right.
what are options that we can look at to say, yeah, we need to do this, or we'd love to do it, we can't afford it, or whatever that may be.
Well, we also need to look at our special ed, because it's really that achievement gap. When you look
Yep.
at it that way, it's anyone who's non-special ed to special ed, anyone who's free and reduced to not free and reduced. I mean, we may need to have a free and reduced community liaison. Right now, we were only granted to cultural for our Somali and Latino families.
Good point, though, Linda.
Yeah, and that is a good point around special education, because we, the whole beauty of response to intervention is the idea that, you know how kids qualify for special ed? They only qualify if there's a huge discrepancy, if their ability is really high, but they're performing at a low level. It is hard to find that discrepancy until you get to like 4th and 5th grade. And we know what research says when you wait that long. You wait that long, and closing that gap is almost impossible. So with RTI, because the interventions are so tight and they're so well done, eventually, as a district, you'll be able to use those interventions to document, hey, we tried this, 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 and this, didn't work, so let's slide that student into the special services they'll receive in special ed without focusing on dual discrepancy. I mean, that's where RTI came from, because we know dual discrepancy does not work. Absolutely. So, I'm going to go back to where I was.
Hold on. So just to make sure that they are contracted through 6/30, but the money run out by the end of the school year?
Say it again?
The liaisons, will their money be out by the end of the school year, or can we keep them employed somehow through June 30th?
They will be, their money runs out June 30th, right? Yeah.
So we could
Yep.
theoretically
Absolutely.
keep them to work?
Well,
Do something
theoretically, the money
creative.
for the SIG grant runs through June 30. The
Right.
other money was, the other group we're paying for is out of Title I.
Oh,
and-
that's true.
And the rural education funding.
And early
Rural-
literacy.
rural,
Okay.
we're using that funds to pay for the ones at Roosevelt. The SIG grant pays for the ones at
Kennedy.
Kennedy.
Right.
It depends on when the funds are gone, and it may be a June 30 date for
But-
them also.
Okay,
It also depends on whether or not we get those funds again next year. I mean, we have to find a way to have those two buildings be fairly similar
right.
in terms of the liaisons, because they both need them. And I think we found that out this year, that both buildings needed
Yeah.
those, so.
And both
Right.
buildings are listed as Title I schools, so every
Correct.
child in those two buildings are Title I students.
Correct.
It's
Yeah.
not just a portion of the student body, it's all students enrolled at Kennedy
Yeah.
Roosevelt that are Title I.
It's a whole school Title
What else,
Really?
Mike?
No, even 30 days, if we could make a couple parent contacts, and that in June could be
Absolutely.
amazing.
Yeah, and that's a really good thing to think about, because we're doing quite well with our SIG grant. I think we're underspending, so that's something for us to think about.
Mike, if I could just jump, one thing that
Sure.
we've never had before is they will be available to help us through summer school.
Right.
Summer school will last
Never
for
had.
3 weeks through the month of June, and we've never had that support before, so that's going to be a really added benefit for summer school.
Yep, they've been pretty remarkable. All right, so I'm going to explain this, and then I'm going to let you look at some information. One of the things that we started looking at, excuse me, with teachers this year and next year, we're going to be spotlighting it even more, is this tier transition. If you take a look at the kids in Tier 3, I'm going to look at fall, you'll notice that in the red, in the fall, there were 45 students, or 26.5% of the student body, that were in the red. Remember, those are the neediest kids in that Tier 3, the highest need. And then what I want to draw your attention to is how they moved students. I want you to see where it says transition, the next column over. Of those students that were in red, 21 of those students were moved to green. Do you see where that 21 is? So the 21 of those kids that are originally really high, struggling students, they were able to actually shift them all the way down to green. And of the students that were the 8 students, of the 45 students, 8 students remained in the red. And
So,
then-
sorry.
Go ahead.
Primary, more of a focus from our faculty, more an awareness, which created the focus, or, I hate to say dumb luck, but dumb luck. I mean, That's a huge change.
Yeah, that's a huge shift.
And how we didn't realize that before, I don't know, but,
And at this point, what we've done with teachers is we've went back to teachers and said, based on your fall data, set a goal. As a grade level, what's a goal? What do you think would be a good percentage of students that you could move that you can move to green? And they've all set a goal. They set a goal for their grade levels. I think they set a goal for their classrooms, and that's.
Great.
And next year, we're going to extend that even more, and we're going to actually have them address who are the students, name them. Who are the students that you moved from red to green? Let's celebrate that. Who are the students that maybe went from green to red? We need to think about that. What's going on? What do we need to do differently? And so we'll be talking more about that next year when we do our chutes and ladders, but we haven't tackled that one this year. We're going to be tackling that next year. So it actually helps teachers really stick a name to a number and help transition and move those kids and set goals. Okay. So the next thing is you should all have access to the triangles, right? Actually for the schools. And I want you to just to take a couple minutes and maybe just talking to the person sitting next to you. If you need a paper copy, Carrie's got a paper copy available. And what I want you to do is these are the discussion questions I want you to have. I want you to think about what is the percent of kids that we move. Now you have by grade level, by assessment, by building. So we didn't separate them by teacher. We just thought for right now, the best thing for you to look at is, and it was a request that came from a board member here, is we want to look at building and we want to look at grade level. So I want you just to take a look at those and talk to somebody sitting by you about it and talk about what is the percentage of students that moved. Was there a decrease of students identified in tier 2? And are there areas for celebration? And are there areas for concern and further reflection? Because we came up with a conclusion. Took us a while, but we figured out, we had one grade level that we went, oh my goodness, what's going on? But after a little bit of discussion and a lot of data analysis, we figured out where our problem was, and it really wasn't a problem, it was really a plus. So take a couple minutes with somebody by you and just have that quick discussion. We'll just do that for a couple minutes and then we'll move on.
Okay, thanks. No, what's this? It's just being able to read this.
We have the boss in this one.
This is Kennedy So this is comparing K to K. So if you look here, this is Kennedy, this is Roosevelt, this is their kindergarten class for the two buildings. And so you can see And that's what I was going to say, you're going to probably see that because some kids got more familiar with the text. So you can sound.
So the percentage.
So did she move to green then at 31?
She moved to green.
I think we just need to pick a one and look at it. So I mean, look at, this is huge, 49 to 81. And that's letter sound. And in first grade, that's pretty significant.
that looks like it's changing for
About 8
most.
student movement.
Grade
Yep.
3 to grade 3 curriculum based on Kennedy versus Roosevelt.
I would still like to see this pyramid have 4 tiers. So then we know how many move from green to enrichment. Focusing on this, if we're not monitoring the numbers of enrichment, or we're not monitoring.
I'm assuming each teacher.
To keep them exceeding.
Keep them engaged and
Right. Right now, some of them are falling back. They're still meeting, but they're not exceeding to the level that they were exceeding.
So you can find out what a teacher specifically